How will you use the different landscapes, habitats, and species to create ecos?
By pulling tiles out of a bag.
Studio 3. I'm Sara Meadows.
And I'm Melissa Delp. Today we're taking a look at Ecos from AEG.
It's from designer John D. Clare and artwork by Sabrina Merriman.
It plays 2 to 6 players in about an hour. And let's jump in and take a look at how it plays.
To set up the game, give each player 7 cubes and a dial token set at start.
Place out the scoreboard with markers for each player and create the starting landscape with 1 desert, 1 grassland, and 2 water tiles.
Assemble each player's hands, and then each player places their starting active cards on the table, and you're ready to begin.
The start player is the harbinger and draws 1 element out of the bag. All players can choose to place 1 cube on a matching spot on one of their cards.
If they don't have a matching spot, they will rotate their dial 1 turn clockwise.
Until their dial reaches gain a card. Then they can choose to gain a card in their hand, or they may wait until they reach this side to play a card from their hand or gain an additional cube.
Once someone completes a card, they remove the cubes and carry out all the effects on the card. Some cards allow you to gain additional elements, victory points, or place tiles or use other effects.
Landscape features like mountains and trees might be added, or animals can be placed in environments.
Once a wild element has been drawn from the bag, the elements are returned and the bag is passed to the next player. If a wild is drawn and someone has reached 80 points, the game is over and the player with the most points wins.
So what we described is how the rulebook says you should do your first game. It has some preset hands that you give players, but once you know the game, you can draft cards and you can arrange those starting hands in different ways.
You can also set up the continent a little bit differently as well. Instead of using the 2 water and the desert and the grassland, that can also be mixed up a little bit and offer a little bit different gameplay depending on what you start with.
Yeah, so there's definitely variability there. I would say from like playing it the first time when you have those, I don't know, about 12 cards in your hand and you're trying to figure out what do I do with these things, you really need to focus on how do you get points. Because you can do a lot of things like, oh, I'm putting stuff out on the board, I'm putting animals or trees, but if it's not getting you points, then it's not really worth doing.
Yeah, if you use those preset hands, each of them seems to have kind of a focus or a way to get points. I know I've played with the gorilla hand a couple times, and that one seems to have cards that are really easy to get, but they only offer like, oh, gain this specific symbol on another card, and that's the only thing. But if you look through the hand and that deck, there are 2 or 3 cards that give you tons of points. And all of those other cards are ways to fill those cards in very quickly. Something that is unique about this game compared to some other games I've played with a similar mechanic is those cards, after you complete one of those cards, the card itself will rotate and they all have little leaf symbols on them, and you can only do them a certain number of times. So some of them that may give you lots of points, you are limited in how many times you're able to complete that card, and then it's discarded from the game.
Yeah, I did like that about the game, especially if you're watching someone else and they've kind of done all the steps to perfectly set up this thing, and then they get like 15 points off of one card, and you're going, what? But then you see it can only be activated once or twice. That's a little better than a card maybe that you're getting 5 points off of, but you can trigger it 4 times.
Yes. I have played Rise of Augustus, and I think this is kind of a new way to use that almost bingo-like mechanic where you are just pulling tiles out of the bag and everyone places them on one of their cards. One thing that's different from Rise of Augustus was that in Rise of Augustus, if you've used all your tokens to fill in spots, you can start moving them. And I kind of liked that better. Like, you felt awful when you had to move a token off of one that you're trying to complete to fill in another spot, because you realize, oh, I ran out of tokens, I'm gonna have to move some stuff around, and you're like, I've wasted my tokens on placing it previously. But I still feel like I was accomplishing something. In Ecos, if you don't have something to place, you have that dial that you can rotate, which it does take a few turns to be able to do anything with it. So sometimes you feel like you are just sitting there rotating on some turns.
Yeah, I think a strategy that as you play it more is deciding when to place your tokens, because it's not mandatory. So just because a water tile is pulled doesn't mean I have to place my cube on a water. I can choose not to save that cube because maybe I'm working on a different card. And I know in some games I just spread my cubes out too much.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, oh, I can't really move them, so I need to wait to get some more cubes. Whereas in later games, thinking ahead of, oh, I need at least 2 more cubes to complete this card, so I don't want to put them on other spots.
Yeah, another thing that happens in the game that we didn't really explain really well is if several people complete their cards at the same time, it goes in starting player order, because they may be affecting that continent that's being built. And sometimes people will thwart what you need to happen on that turn because you may be further along in that start player. I think that's the one downside to this game, is if you're playing with the higher player counts, there can be a little bit of downtime. The rest of the time, everyone's simultaneously doing stuff. But if lots of people completed a card on the same turn, then you will have to wait and take turns.
Yeah, and it can even get to the situation where something that someone earlier, what they do, affects what I was planning to do with my completed card. Now, the game does say you can choose at that point to take your cube off and not activate that card if it's not beneficial to you. So I think that is a good thing to be able to adjust to the other players. But yeah, there's a lot of interactivity with that main board area, because a lot of the cards score based on the arrangement of the tiles or the animals or mountains and trees. And so you're going along trying to place your animals all in the right spot, and then someone moves them or eats them with their cheetahs or lions. And so you have to be able to adapt to what's going on in the game at that moment.
I think they did a great job with the artwork and components. They're very nice components, even down to minor details like the water tiles are a little bit thinner than the land tiles so that they actually come up out of the water when they're surrounded by water. And then there are a couple different shapes of the mountains and trees. So it makes a very nice experience when you're playing the game.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend this if you like kind of engine building and the mostly simultaneous play, except when everyone kind of hits their cards at the same time. And then just the theme of moving that continent around and the animals and things and trying to set up the high scoring opportunities.
If this sounds like something you are interested in, you can check out Ecos from AEG. Thanks for checking out our videos and subscribing to Tantrum.
Reviewing Ecos, that's the name of the game, from AEG.
Yay!
Reset stuff!